Good evening and welcome. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. And we are thrilled to bring you the next reading in our Uplifting Voices series. I'm extremely grateful to these writers for spending an hour with us, sharing their work and conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. This event received support from the International Institute Fund at the Community Foundation of the Mahoning Valley. Simmons Buntin is author of Satellite, Essays on Fatherhood and Home, Near and Far, a collection of sustainable community case studies, Unsprawl, Remixing Spaces as Places, and books of poetry, Bloom and Riverfall. He's co-editor of Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy, and founding editor-in-chief of Terrain.org and president of Terrain Publishing. Simmons is a senior director of marketing and communications at the University of Arizona's College of Information Science in Tucson. Welcome, Simmons.
Thanks so much, Karen, for having me. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here to read with Michael and Ira. I'm going to read one of the 16 essays in Satellite titled Roundabout, which is a braided numbered essay. I think all we need to know is that my mother is Swedish, immigrated to the United States when she married my father, who is of Scottish lineage. And this is an essay about well, you'll see. It's called Roundabout. 1. The last day I saw my mother alive was June 21st, 2004. She was 70 years old, but with long white hair and skin wrapped around the bones of her hand like the translucent membrane of a bat's wing, she looked 90. In the third floor lobby of Atlanta's venerable Buckhead nurse care facility, she was folded into a wheelchair, her body an umbrella draped in a brightly colored muumuu as strings of quartz and turquoise looped around her neck. Annalise and Juliet, 6 and 3 years old, recognized their Swedish grandmother, Nana Diana, and yet hesitated, as did my wife Billy and I. We had known about her declining health, and though it had been 2 years since we had last seen her, she had aged, it seemed, exponentially. Less than 2 years earlier, she had walked on her own, moved ably, though not nimbly, among the tight corridors of her assisted living unit, working late as she documented her solo trips of the last 20 years. Now she hardly moved at all. Hers was not solely a disease of the body, the sprawl of cancer, or the body's turning against itself as with lupus or MS. Hers was not even a disease of the mind, though she was diagnosed early in her adult life with bipolar depression and never leveled beyond a season or two on antidepressants. Instead, hers was a disease of the spirit, confined to the cold indifference of a wheelchair, constrained to a senior apartment she could no longer maintain, and surrounded by lonely widows whose last ambition was to save her soul for a pearly gated heaven she always rebuffed, Nana Diana was simply ready to leave. After seeing her body failing around her, even as her eyes resonated with the nautical fire of her native Baltic Sea, I believed I was ready too. Before our house was built on the northern half of Savano, the desert was bladed and the umber earth raised 5 feet. Yet there remained a circle of original ground, and at its center a massive saguaro rose 30 feet above the pavement. Each morning, a cacophony of birdsong exploded from the cactus, followed by the birds bickering their way into neighbors' yards. Come evening, the saguaro's leathery skin darkened against the slow stain of dusk. In between, an uneven wash of cars whirled around the single sentinel, neighbors and construction workers, delivery vans and visitors. Though technically a traffic circle, I thought of the intersection more as a roundabout, the British term for a crossroads at which incoming traffic yields to cars already in the loop. Modern roundabouts are different from traditional traffic circles, first used in Paris in 1906 and then called giratories, meaning one-way circulation around a central island. Compared to stop and go traffic circles or more traditional intersections, roundabouts cut accidents in half while decreasing congestion and emissions as the cars keep moving. Though ours was ringed by four stop signs, they were largely ignored, making it, quote, non-conforming, according to city planners. But I prefer roundabout more because of its double meaning, a circular intersection, yet also a terminus arrived at in an intersect or circuitous way. A journey that does not end from where it launches, nor follow a linear course. One morning, cool though it was mid-September, I walked to the roundabout, dipped beneath the railing, and dropped in onto the desert floor to photograph the vibrant autumn wildflowers. I remember a car cruising around my head as a sulfur-winged butterfly alighted on a desert marigold. Sparrows and starlings flew in and out of the saguaro's many cavities. A pair of fighter jets arced high overhead, a regular sortie from the Air Force Base to the west. And 1,700 miles to the east, a nurse I would never meet found my mother limp and dehydrated, her spirit nearly flown. 3. My mother still had an appetite on that last visit, though she was feeble. At the administrator's desk, I checked her out for lunch as Annalise and Juliet squabbled about who would push the wheelchair into the elevator and out to the car. When the door slid open and a crowd of people spilled into the hallway, I decided I'd better do the pushing. We arrived at the main lobby to the percussion of a Georgia thunderstorm, relentless, deafening, and beautiful. As I pulled around in my brother's old Volvo, I was drenched but relieved nonetheless to get out of the nursing home, happy to take my mother from that stale and sterile place, if only for a short while. I assisted her into the front seat as Billy and the girls piled into the back, and then coaxed the car up the steep incline of the exit as the wipers worked noisily against the rain. What didn't work, however, was the air conditioning. The windshield steamed up as we perspired, the air inside the car nearly viscous even as we rolled the windows down an inch, then three. But we made it safely, if not slowly, to Nana's favorite restaurant, Joe's Crab Shack, 10 blocks away. For me, there was no foreshadowing that this would be our last meal together. Perhaps my mother knew, as she lunged into the crab legs and fried shrimp as if she hadn't eaten an actual meal in months. And considering she hadn't ventured outside in nearly that long, I recognized that this was her first enjoyable food in weeks. After the fractured conversation of lunch, when Annalise and Juliet were too distracted by the overstimulating decorations to stay seated, when Billy was mostly silent except as she implored the girls to behave, when I found the growing heat of embarrassment for my mother who could not help but draw attention to her garish dress and all-out consumption, when my heart worked its cold vice of concern into my throat, when the restaurant's blaring music ground its way into the base of my skull, when, God damn it, why wouldn't the waitress refill my iced tea? After that, I was ashamed. I was my mother's youngest son, and eating at me all that time was a broken promise I had made nearly 20 years earlier. Even before moving 1,000 miles west to college and leaving my mother alone in Florida, I promised to take care of her, that no matter where I was or how she was, she could live with me. It was a pledge that I knew Billy could abide. The care of elderly parents by their adult children is a cultural dilemma that becomes more relevant every year. In 2020, more than 42 million households in the United States provided unpaid care for ailing parents, according to the National Alliance for Caregiving, a more than 400% increase since 2000. Family caregivers spend not only time, an average of 18 hours of care a week, but also financial resources, both in money they funnel toward health care and in income lost by serving as caregivers. A 2023 report by AARP estimates the value of family caregivers' unpaid contributions at $600 billion. In total, 1 in 6 Americans now provides care for an elderly adult. Though a majority of family caregivers feel appreciated and admit a positive sense of increased responsibility, they are also frustrated, overwhelmed, and themselves less healthy. And many, especially children who provide some level of care for parents from a distance, those who cannot or by choice do not live with their parents, carry increasing guilt. Intentions, too, have a roundabout way of eluding us. Billy and I transferred from city to city before our children were born. We didn't have room in our small house, and would my mother really want to be confined to the tiny suburban Colorado home? Then Annalise was born, and she needed a nursery, her own room. And my mother was a wanderer, as she loaded her Chevy Suburban after I left home and drove around the country to, quote, discover herself a little later than most, she once told me. Moving ecstatically, if not erratically, from place to place on her manic highs before crashing, usually through the winters, in unbearable lows. Sometimes she arrived unannounced at my brother's homes, staying too long, working like a pneumatic hammer on the foundation of their marriages. Once she knocked well past midnight on the hollow door of my college apartment, her silver hair pulled back but frayed, eyes cloudy from the strain of driving under dim headlamps. The county highways tricking her, she said, on every turn. She stayed over winter break while my roommates and I traveled south. When we returned, she was gone, the only sign of her visit an iridescent splay of oil in the closest parking space and a bag of cigarette butts stuffed into the trash. Care for the elderly is no less a dilemma in Europe, where Nana Diana was born. In Germany, 1 in 10 women, the primary family caregivers for aging parents, quits her full-time job to take care of her parents. Not so long ago, France passed a law requiring children to, quote, honor and respect their parents, pay them an allowance, and provide or fund a home for them, unquote, the French media reports, because elderly parents, largely ignored by a society obsessed with youth, were committing suicide at a rate of more than 60 people a week. In my mother's Sweden, responsibility for ailing parents has fallen to the state, which provides for nearly all elder care through a mix of social and health insurance and entitlement programs like paid time off for family caregivers. Even with state support, or perhaps because of it, Sweden boasts one of Europe's highest percentages of parental assistance. Adult children live closer to their parents in Sweden and throughout Europe. In America, a nation of immigrants, children migrate. Caregiving is therefore less an expenditure of time than money. Nana Diana lived in Georgia, but her children settled in Indiana, Arizona, and California. Only her oldest son, my older brother Miles, lived nearby. For years, my brothers and I sent money to our mother. For years, Billy and I talked about how we should bring her out to live with us. For years, we watched from half a continent away as first her health and then her spirit failed. And so Billy, the girls, and I have driven down from a vacation in Tennessee to be with Nana Diana, who had lived in the senior apartment for years, and it really was best, wasn't it? We couldn't provide the kind of care she needed, the services. We didn't even live on a bus route. And who takes the bus in Tucson with its snoring desert summers anyway? 4. At the morgue, while viewing her body, which in the end was not so different from when I had seen her only months earlier, though her eyes were closed, I could not touch my mother. I didn't know how to say goodbye, to say anything at all. The attendant didn't leave. I did not ask her to leave. But there was absolute silence and a pallid beauty rising. 5. In the mid 1990s, Billy and I attended our first family reunion together at my brother's house in Indiana. As the youngest couple, with no children yet of our own, we found ourselves without a room, sleeping on a briefcase thin mattress atop a sleeper sofa in the living room. One evening, we heard my sister Diana's voice rising from the basement, agitating like a swarm of bees. There was no door to dampen the noise. She was yelling at our mother, accusing her of denying us a proper Christmas when we grew up, though it was a one-sided argument. When we were young, my mother first downplayed and then lost the Christmas spirit altogether because, she explained, the season could never compare to the holidays she shared with her grandmother in Alanu, a palace south of Stockholm at the end of a wide roundabout near the sea. The holidays of her childhood meant horse-drawn sleigh rides, live spruces hosting white candles that flickered like the faraway windows of a hillside village, ornate holiday meals cooked by full-time chefs, served by full-time stewards. 6. One September morning, Annalise, Juliet, and I scaled the concrete embankment of the traffic circle to explore the enclosed space beneath the saguaro. Down at ground level, we found three more cacti, a silver-green prickly pear with pancake-sized pads, a barrel cactus spun in curvilinear rose red, fishhook-shaped spines, and a small grouping of pincushion, the undersized cactus with oversized blooms. In the shade of the circle, we also found a young ocotillo, leafless, stalks the shape and strength of rebar spreading vase-like from the gravel floor. Fortunately, we did not see any snakes, but Annalise nearly caught a black-collared lizard as Juliet watched a queen butterfly lope by just above her head. Though we learned quickly that climbing out of the depression was not as easy as dropping in, eventually we managed it, even as the process convinced Juliet she'd stay at street level next time. Street level is likewise an important consideration for roundabouts, whose recipe for success reads like the chant of a new age traffic engineer: yield, deflect, flare. Yield to traffic in the circle, deflect vehicles at the entry, and flare from single to multiple lanes to increase capacity. 7. I was in my office at work on September 15th, 2004, when my brother Miles called. Our mother was in the hospital again. Hold tight, he said. I'll call you back with the details. But it was more serious, he warned, than her previous stays. For her children, our mother's visits to the hospital were worrying but not uncommon. She had artery concerns that resulted in atrophy in one leg, bronchial concerns because she'd smoked since she was 14, mental health concerns as she periodically threatened suicide. More serious. His voice hung. 20 minutes later, I had booked a flight to Atlanta via Salt Lake City that was to leave in 4 hours. It was an all-nighter, arriving around 5 a.m. We were not sure if she would make it through the night, and I didn't have many details. I knew she was admitted the previous day after her nurse found her, the bedsheets drenched in sweat and blood-laced vomit. She had a virus. The flu? No, a bacterial infection. What did that mean? Quickly, frantically, I sent an email to my team at work. I would be out for an unknown period of time, not checking email, not checking voicemail, unavailable. As I rushed down the hall, a coworker called after me, "Is everything all right?" The words lodged in my throat did not surface. In my bones, the same long bones I share with my mother, I knew she was dying. I called my brother David as I sped home to pack and say goodbye to my wife and daughters. He was driving down from Indiana and would pick me up at a light rail station a half dozen blocks from the Piedmont Hospital, the same hospital where he and Miles were born. When I arrived home, Juliet had been crying. She had only seen Nana Diana a handful of times, but had a powerful connection with her. Both were sensitive, perhaps psychic. I explained that Nana was very sick, would probably die. Billy told me to try to get an hour's sleep. I had been up late the night before and likely wouldn't be able to sleep much on the flights. In our room, I blocked out the daylight and lay alone on the bed, crying quietly, when suddenly there was a calm, a knowing I could not explain but fully understood. Yes, she would pass on tonight. She was telling me that. And I was taken back to when I was Annalise's age, 6 years old, living in Lexington, Kentucky, when my mother used to call me home as I played outside, call me home psychically. I could hear that voice clearly in my head, sure, but as if she were mere feet away. So this was it. And she was ready. But was I? I did not want to talk to anybody at the airport, on the airplane. Though the seat next to me was empty on the first leg of the flight, I could not read the book I brought, nor the back of the seat magazine I usually enjoyed paging through. Could not listen to the flight attendant reviewing emergency procedures in the sharp light that split the airplane's windows, shattering the overhead compartments and passenger seats with their abusive patterns of blue and brown and red. Could not shut my eyes nor keep them open. The Salt Lake sky was dark when we arrived, and I was in the dark about my mother. How was she? I called Miles. He was alone. David had not yet arrived, would not until early morning. Diana would not touch down until after me. Miles was crying as he entered the room with our mother. He described her body withdrawing from itself, starting at her toes, as her feet and then legs grew cold and began to lose what remaining color they had. She can only beat it, the doctor had told him, if she was willing to live. We both knew she didn't have the will. And then I was in tears again as he continued to describe the way a body shuts down, system by system. Her eyes were closed and would never open again, the breathing light and almost non existent, heartbeat distant, slowing. I hung up and did not care that people were staring at me, may or may not have been concerned that a grown man was on his knees heaving, as if retching, as if the dark cloak of the sky had slipped through the terminal windows and placed its unceasing chill on the arc of his back. 8. Yield. My mother was married to my father for 10 years, but the man she first loved and loved most was someone she met in southern Rhodesia when she was 19. They were passionate, committed, and then this Italian man whose name I know only as Gerardo, whose story I can only tell from the memory of my mother's lament, broke. Whether he had dementia or the anti-malarial scrambled his mind, something made him unable to remember her. Like that, their lives were separate. Deflect. When my sister was only weeks old and in her bassinet in the living room of the Miami house my mother and father built, her mother had a strong urge to pick up her daughter quickly. She did. Seconds later, a section of ceiling collapsed, crushing the bassinet. Flare. My mother's first love was horses, and she was known widely in the field of thoroughbred racehorse pedigrees throughout her career. In Miami, though, where my sister and I were born, she volunteered when we were toddlers at a clinic for battered women, many of whom were teenage mothers. By then the marriage with my father was all but over, and her blonde hair had gone to silver, even though she was not yet 35. By then, with the visage of a sage diva, gray-blue eyes set elegantly among Scandinavian skin and that radiant hair, she had dedicated herself to women who could not speak for themselves. She channeled her anger and passion and an eloquent pen into visibility for the problem that led to funding for the program. 9. My mother died, my brother David told me when I called him once the plane touched down, while I was somewhere over Texas, or Arkansas, perhaps. Only Miles saw her before she passed, though she was not conscious. In a way, I was relieved, not only because I knew that she was finally at peace, perhaps once again with the grandmother she so loved, but also because I was afraid to see her in that near-death state. We were all afraid. Her death was a heavy emptiness my siblings and I held as we gathered together for the first time in many years. We had to let it go, even as we had all struggled separately and together over her care, even as the guilt consumed us. Release it now, her spirit said. My mother's wake was held at the communal house of Baha'i friends, friends who saw her alive in the hospital the evening before, who were astounded when they learned that she had died. They had been talking lightly, even joking. After the wake, and after we spent 3 tedious days cleaning out her apartment and storage units, my brothers and sister and I had lunch at Joe's Crab Shack. It was not a celebration of her life, as the wake had been, but rather a recognition of the roundabout way we exist, even within our own families. The gathering was the release of sadness and strength, a final parting in awkward grace, a circling back of the extraordinary life she had led, even though by the time my sister and I moved out and moved on, so much of her vigor had already been lost. We ate our fill, cracked a crab leg on the empty place setting left for her. The next day, David and I left early, his Jeep tugging a trailer packed full with horse books and magazines for a farm library in Lexington. An hour north of Atlanta, we made an unplanned stop at a state park. We agreed that Nana Diana, who traveled from state to who traveled from state to state and park to park as she made countless connections on her manic highs, would appreciate having her ashes released across a wild and rolling landscape. Our act of subversion was trickier than expected. Sticking to the dawn shadows, we leapt the fence into the closed park and jogged a half mile to a large hill of clover and bluegrass, thick live oaks resting heavy boughs all around. We spoke a blessing, paused to breathe the cool, humid air, and then opened the small container to the wind, which took the fine gray dust into itself. As her ashes caught the motion of the air, lingering a moment before dissipating in a white silver plume, I caught a quick movement along the far hedgerow. I searched then for some sign, a hawk or fox or wild horse perhaps, a chestnut mare racing among the trees like a young girl might sprint between the spruces and firs of a Swedish seaside estate. But it was only the wind bending the branches, delivering our mother, whirling out and then circling back, whispering, "You are ready." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simmons. Michael Loderstedt's recent writings have been published in Pinesong, winner of the Later Award in 2025, Crayfish Magazine, Naugatuck River Review, Muleskinner Journal, Kakalak, and the North Carolina Literary Review, winner of the Applewhite Poetry Prize 2021. His debut book of poetry, Why We Fished, received the silver medal from the UK Poetry Book Awards 2023. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Karen. I thought I'd read three rather short poems about my father. My father was a German immigrant, and he came to this country after the war. He was also a German naval officer. So I had a lot of explaining to do as a child. Um, that trying to play down the fact that your father was a Nazi. Um, this poem is entitled "Things I Know About My Father." He was a German when Germans were not loved, a naval officer who could have killed or been killed just years before. Mother said after the war they opened the gates to his British POW camp. Everyone just walked home. Gunter plotted the broken roads from the Baltic Sea to Berlin. A couple of American GIs gave him a ride, some smokes, and that is why he chose this country. Louis Armstrong singing Mac the Knife on the console stereo, my mother dancing and smoking cigarettes. My father was a doctor, not a truck driver, not a traveling salesman, not a jazz musician, not a derelict, an obstetrician who brought babies into this world. He helped bring us too, but you would never know that. A woman once ran up to our house, a near blue infant in her arms calling for help. My father pulled a tiny red toy dump truck from his throat with long steel forceps. The woman cried. Her son screamed for air. He was a hero. When my mother left and moved us to the island, my father never called or visited ever. Our letters unanswered, or worse, merely excuses that he was too busy, too broke. Riding the school bus across the bridge, low tide smell of marsh mud, older kids sitting beside my brother and sister and me, thumping our ears blood red, singing, "You ain't got no daddy." Discovered Gunther's obituary dated January 27th, 2024. Pulaski, Virginia, no mention of our family. I once visited my father in 1980 while in art school on spring break. Brought him a gift, a screen print. He took it to a frame shop. They framed it in gold. I remember feeling something akin to pride. So, as I mentioned there and alluded to, we moved to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And that area, oddly enough, saw a lot of U-boat activity. And this poem is about the connection my father had to U-boats. Dispatch from Torpedo Alley. U-boat 352 lies on the sandy bottom off Carolina. Its diesel engine quiet to avoid detection of depth charges dropped from scanning aircraft. Red drum find mates with a low throbbing sound made by rubbing bones in their heads called otoliths. From nowhere, a submarine breached alongside a wooden shrimp trawler, nets out, crew panicked. 88 Miller deck guns swiveled toward the local fishermen. In perfect English, the submarine captain speaks. "Give us your food and water and half your catch, and we'll not sink your fishing boat." On a quiet night, you can hear the low roar of fish grinding the bones in their heads. A submarine limped back to port, Schweinmunda, on the Baltic Sea, where my father served as a medic in the Kriegsmarine. A young doctor who studied in Nuremberg, swept up in the war, fixing U-boat sailors shattered from underwater explosions. One screamed from the deck, "Herr Doctor, hör auf mit dem Klingen, stop the ringing in my head." On the banks, fishermen's houses shake from torpedo blasts, and fire lit up the horizon. Another supply ship sunk, leaving Moorhead. Cases of new parachutes washed up on the island. The men stripped the cords to mend their nets. Churchwomen sang hymns, swayed in choir gowns sewn from parachutes, swishing of white nylon in time to "Standing on the Promises." Voices soaring above the wooden rafters, to the bell they dare not ring. Each night, all the electric lights remain dark. Red drum gathered in the shallows. So on my mother's side, I'm sort of a dual child of immigrants. Although she was born in the U.S., her parents were from Sicily. They came as children, her father. And this is kind of a little bit funny, I think, about the Italian side. It's called Tan Line. You watch the half pot come to boil. You know the linguine will be too starchy, but it takes less time. You cringe as two hands snap the noodles. You whisper, "My people would never do that." You always fold pasta gently into salted water, stirring, keeping them whole. But your people were petty crooks. You gasped at the jumble of box of watches in the trunk of the Imperial. You asked, "Where'd you get all these, Grandpa?" "None of your goddamn business. Take one." You picked the self-timing, self-winding Seiko, broad as a tank on your skinny wrist. You wear that thing up and down the island, never thinking it plucked from a lone beach towel or a glove box. When you swing your tiny arm, you feel its weight winding, always winding. At night, You awake to the outline of white skin and thin blue veins in the shape of a watch. So I picked a couple of poems by a couple of writers that have deep connections to both immigration and um, the immigrant experience. The first I want to read is called "All the Oranges of Tripoli" by Ohio's very own Ruth Awad, and it's great, and also I think uses a little humor to get at the immigrant experience. It's not enough for everything to stem from Lebanon. No, my father contends, it was Tripoli where oranges first originated. And if my sisters had any doubt, just look at this Wikipedia entry for oranges, my father says, his gap-toothed grin widening, not unlike an orange split open. Just look. And like magic, whose origins I'm told are also Lebanese, there for the world to see, unassailable proof that oranges come not from the South China, nor Spain, but Tripoli. And I know oranges belong to everyone and no one. And I know my father is not above editing Wikipedia. Did you know Wikipedia may have Lebanese roots? And his research may be scientifically unsound, a story heard from an uncle or a cousin, but this is absolutely true. Once there were vast orange orchards in Tripoli, and when they were in bloom, the whole city smelled like citrus. It was like a beautiful woman's perfume. It was like you could smell sunlight. And during the war and after, every time Tripoli burned, imagine the fruit peeled in your palm. And then the other poem I chose is by Ocean Vuong, titled "The Bull." His book "Time as a Mother," which has so many great poems in it about his relationship to his mother. I used the first one, which I thought was almost magical. I thought the bull. He stood alone in the backyard, so dark the night purpled around him. I had no choice. I opened the door and stepped out. Wind in the branches. He watched me with kerosene blue eyes. What do you want? I asked, forgetting I had no language. He kept breathing to stay alive. I was a boy, which meant I was a murderer of my childhood, and like all murderers, my God was stillness. My God, he was still there. Like something prayed for by a man with no mouth. The green-blue lamp swirled in its socket. I didn't want him. I didn't want him to be beautiful. But needing beauty, to be more than hurt, gentle enough to want, I reached for him. I reached, not the bull, but the depths. Not an answer, but an entrance, the shape of an animal, like me. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Ira Sekurungrong is the recipient of the 2015 American Book Award for Southside Buddhist, a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship in Nonfiction Literature, an Arts and Letters Fellowship, and the Anita Claire Scharf Award in Poetry. His work has appeared in The Rumpus, American Poetry Review, The Sun, and Creative Nonfiction. He's the president of Sweet, a literary confection, and a literary nonprofit organization, and is the Richard L. Thomas Professor of Creative Writing at Kenyon College. Welcome, Ira.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you Simmons and Michael for sharing your work. It's so great that you evoked Michael, Ruth Awad. Ruth actually was my tattoo artist for a while, so I have a couple of her works on me. So that's really great, and I love Ruth's poetry, and what a wonderful human. So I'm going to read two pieces from Southside Buddhist, and both pieces kind of talk about the Thai immigrant experience. I think for Thai people started immigrating to America in the 60s and 70s, and their immigrant experience was very different from, say, first wave Asian American writers like Japanese and Chinese Americans. And my mother came in 1968, and her famous line is she began packing as soon as she arrived. And my father arrived in 1972, and with them came a whole bunch of Thai immigrants too, who formulated a really wonderful community in Chicago, in particular. And so they formulated the Thai Buddhist temple, Wat Tamaran, the Thai Buddhist temple. And the pieces I'm going to read today are both, they're two pieces. One is a very short piece and one a little longer, though I'm going to skip around, are both set in the Thai Buddhist temple of Chicago. The first piece is called The Cruelty We Delivered, an Apology. 1. We didn't know what to do. Your rocket energy sending Thai monks into fits as they chased you through the Chicago temple, hands hiking robes like dresses, flip-flops slapping calloused heels. Your trouble made us roll our eyes and turn our back when you wanted nothing more than to pal around with us. You were a boy after all. So were we. But boys are cruel with neglect, crueler than the violence our hands are capable of. 2. We said cruel things, too, in our secret circle, in the temple library, where dust coated books about suffering, where furniture went to rot in the damp back room. Someone said, "He smells like barf." Someone said, "Thai white trash." I said, "No wonder his parents dumped him." How could we know you had hid behind a shelf of Buddhist books, patting a stray cat that made a nest in the hollow of a cabinet? How could we know what was to follow? If we did, would we have stopped our tongues? 3. He's lonely, your grandmother told us. She sold curry grilled chicken and sticky rice on Sundays, like food carts in Thailand. After Buddhism class, we handed her crisp bills for sustenance. Play with him, she said, flipping drumsticks over on the grill, her hair kept under a shower cap. Free food, she said. We were working class boys. Free was free. 4. But your play was different. Watch, you said, and launched a rock through a temple window. Watch, you said, and trampled through the monk's vegetable garden, tomatoes staining your Converse. The monks would come then, your name a battle cry from exasperated mouths. What vows might they have broken if they caught you? You were, I'm sure, the thought that stirred them out of meditative moments. We won't lie. It was funny. Robed men in a mad dash after a sliver of a boy bounding bushes and benzes. But your laughter, how can we forget that cackle that scattered crows? 5. Once you showed us a kitten, a ball of gray in your dark hands. We circled you. We cooed. We tried to touch it, but you yanked it away, held it to your chest. It misses its mother, you said, and delivered it back to its litter. 6. Our parents said you hanged yourself. This was years later when we got married, and we had children, and we lived in other parts of the world, we weren't surprised. We nodded. But I bet we thought about our cruelty and shrunk into ourselves. I can't shake this image, though. The time you stole holy water and dumped it over your head, the dripping glee on your face, your grin a half moon, your teeth blinding white. I remember that, my head hanging low, wishing forgiveness in the form of rain. The second piece is a fragmented essay, and it's circulating around the moment the Queen of Thailand came to the Thai temple one time. And my father was going through a photography phase. And he waited so long to try to get the queen's picture, but instead a picture of him was taken, and this is what the essay revolves around. It's called The Wide Open Mouth. The one piece of fame in my father's life, a picture of him, camera in hand, as the Queen of Thailand passes by. This moment happened in Chicago at the Thai Buddhist temple in the early 80s. Royalty did not visit our temple often, and it seemed like all Thai people in the Midwest congregated at this former Greek Orthodox church, clogging up the residential streets of North Hoynd Avenue. My father was in a period in his life where he recorded everything, constantly carrying with him a Minolta X700. On weekend excursions, he took that camera with him wherever we went and snapped pictures of my mother gathering golden delicious apples, or of me swinging a golf club, or of flowers, lots and lots of flowers. My father was always looking for an opportunity to get rich quick. He bemoaned his time at the tile factory, and I believed he resented the fact that my mother was making more money as a nurse. He wanted something that would give him notoriety, something he could brag about other than his golfing prodigy son. The temple photographer, a man whose name I do not remember, but whose face was skeletal with inflated eyes under thick glasses, had won top prize at a photography contest, fireworks over the Chicago skyline. He had won other prizes too, a picture of monks meditating, a black and white photo of a little Thai girl trying to press the top button of a vending machine. This photographer was married to one of the most attractive women in Temple, and my father, jealous of his success and popularity, thought that perhaps photography might bring him the same type of accolades. It was not his photos, however, that he would be remembered for. It would be this picture taken by the temple photographer on the day the Queen visited Illinois. This photo hung in my parents' bedroom above my father's aluminum desk. The Queen's right profile occupied the left side of the picture, blurry, as if she was part of a fading dream. But dead center was my father, in touching distance of Her Highness, clad in a blue-gray suit, the same one he wore on his wedding in 1974, the only suit he owned, and large tinted glasses that made him look like a shifty poker player. And this we could not get over, his wide open mouth. The open mouth. My mother, when she napped, would occasionally have her mouth wide open. I called it the flycatcher. In a plane headed towards Thailand, my ex-wife stares straight at me, mouth wide open. I wonder if she thinks what a pitiful man I married. When I ask her about the look, she asks, "What look?" One time, I was playing tennis for my high school team, and it was an important doubles match against a rival school when I saw the love of my life then, I don't recall her name, only her freckles, come to cheer me on after her choir practice. I stood wide-mouthed at the net until the ball struck me in the armpit and stuck. Later, my doubles partner said, my mouth could have fit a planet. I was allowed to touch the camera once. My father was usually liberal with his possessions. I could hit rocks and apples with his golf clubs. I could take his leather briefcase and make it my own. I could wear his many Buddhas around my neck. The camera, however, was off limits because once, when he first got the Minolta, I liked the sound the shutter made, a click with the CH sound, and the wind of the film advance lever. I repeatedly pressed the shutter and advanced the film, shooting nothing. When my father developed the film and the camera, most of the photos were blurred brown and green and one unfocused picture of a foot. From that day on, I was not to touch his camera, except one day at the zoo. My father had taken a picture of every animal. He was slow, waiting for the perfect still moment. But animals were animals, and they operated by their own set of laws, not that of the artist. Nature photographer Fran Lanting says, the perfection I seek in my photographic composition is the means to show the strength and dignity of animals in nature. My father captured a monkey with a heart on. My father captured a turtle hiding in its shell. My father captured a bird shielding itself with its wing. My father captured the back of a gorilla. Even when the subject remained static, like the python and boa constrictor in the reptile house, he could not figure out how to negate the glare from the glass. At the end of the day, my mother suggested he take a picture of people, like maybe your son. He complied and took a picture of me pointing at the lion. He took a picture of me messing up my mouth with a good humor bar. He took a picture of me crying because I fell. Finally, I asked my father if I could take a picture of my mother and him. Reluctantly, he agreed, putting the camera strap around my neck and instructing me to hold the camera firmly in my hands. Just push the button, he said. I pushed the button. It was the last picture on the roll. A couple of days later, when my father picked up the film, the picture I had taken showed only my mother. The other half of the picture was black. A yellow streak like lightning split the center. The film hadn't advanced all the way, stuck at half of the frame. My mother smiled from under her great brimmed hat. Behind her was a pond that shot high into the air. Mallards and half of a swan swam back and forth. Kids with balloons and half of a balloon were in the distance. Some of my mother's shoulder was cut off. I could see part of my father's right hand. I had been staring at the photo with the Queen for a while now, the actual photo and the one my mind has constructed. I'm looking beyond it, looking into my father's wide open mouth. The photographer sees something in this moment, in these few seconds. I've spent a lifetime trying to figure out. This is not about the picture anymore, not about my father's mouth. It never has been. Look carefully, the photographer is saying. Lean in close. It is there. At Temple, after Sunday school, my father enrolled me in a photography class run by the Temple photographer. I didn't want to do it. I would rather have played football with the other Thai boys. I would rather have been enrolled in kickboxing down the hall. I was one of two in the class. My father sat with me, the other student. The Temple photographer spoke of stillness. He spoke about photography like a monk talks about meditation. He said your hands could never shake. He said your eyes could never leave the viewfinder. He said a photographer, a real photographer, spends most of his time in the frame of a camera with one eye open. There was sadness in his voice when he said this. He handed me his camera, heavy and bulky, a brand I don't recall, but something German. My father spoke up. Minolta is the best, he said. The temple photographer nodded and smiled. He told me to aim the camera at my father and focus in on his face. Light touches, the photographer said. Take your time. I tried and tried. Tell me when your father becomes clear, he said. My father remained fuzzy around the edges, his features blurry. I turned the lens back and forth. A bit here, a twist there. I did the best I could. When I handed the photographer the camera, he looked through the viewfinder and shrugged. He said, not to worry, but I should be a little softer next time. My father patted me on the back. It was the camera. Minolta is the best. I worked at a camera store for a while that developed photos and sold equipment. The workers were divided into photo developers and salespeople. I was a salesman because I looked good in a tie and had the gift of words. Like my father, I knew all the fancy technological terms so I could spout them at customers. It was all vocabulary, though, because I didn't know how to take a good picture to save my life. My favorite camera to sell were Minoltas. They gave wonderful sale incentives. Sell a Minolta advanced point and shoot and get $20 to $50 extra on your check. No other company could match Minolta's incentive, especially Canon cameras, which gave you nothing. A lot of the time, the photo developers would show us some of the wilder pictures. Naked spring breakers, disgusting pranks, drunken costume parties. But my favorites were always the pictures of people caught unawares. Their mouths were always slightly parted. In those seconds, what raced through my father's mind? The queen, the queen. What would it be like if I were king? She's moving too fast, too fast, too fast. Or perhaps it was a lingering thought. Perhaps at that moment, what weighed his hands down, what made him slow at the camera trigger, was the thought that I am here in the only suit I own, a tile chemist, not the rich entrepreneur I imagined I'd be. And my wife makes more money than me. And my son, who loves me with his entirety, thinks I'm a legend, a superhero. And I'm afraid one day he will discover I'm only a man with hard hands and wispy, impossible dreams. My mother, too, has a picture with the queen. It's a black and white photo, and she's in front of Her Majesty in her 20s, kneeling and receiving her degree from Sirirat Nursing School in Bangkok. I found it in a box just yesterday. It has never been hung up. My father laughed at that photo. He laughed and it echoed in our bi-level home. He laughed and it rattled the pans in the kitchen. We laughed with him. Don't I look good? He said. The best, we told him. We laughed again. I look, he said, like an orangutan, my mother said. Like a golf hole, I said. He shook his head. I look stupid. He laughed again, so hard he began to cry. Why didn't you take a picture? My mother said. He shrugged. She came and went. He went on to say he could feel the wind from her walk, and it felt like a blessing. No, I am wrong. I have seen that look on my father's face one other time. When he left us, the snow covered the driveway. The brake lights lit the snow. The exhaust of his car billowed into the night sky. He had packed his car, and the two of us stood in the front hall, facing each other like cowboys before a draw. Only you couldn't meet my eyes. Where are you going? I asked. Can't tell you. What's your phone number? Can't tell you. When will I see you again? Then that look, mouth like an egg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ira. What a phenomenal reading. I would love to engage you in conversation, if I may. Simmons, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. And I'd like to ask you how living in a family with different ways of speaking and understanding culture has filtered into your writing.
Well, I think I'm the only of my three other siblings who didn't learn any Swedish, and it's in part because the last time I went to Sweden with my mom was when I was 2, and not surprisingly, I don't really remember that. So anything I know from that was what they told me. So other than when she visited us later on and having that accent, there really wasn't much of a different language, literally or figuratively, in growing up. But I was always drawn to those really small stories she would share like the sleigh ride in her Scandinavian winters and her experiences. Because not only did she spend time in Rhodesia, southern Rhodesia, but also time in Italy and in England, and so we kind of held on to those. Now that she's passed away, we have many of her things, and those two have become really their own language in kind of how we move on. And like we have a cookbook from hers from 1950 that's in Swedish, and that's always been kind of a cherished prize. It's really more the language of memory, I suppose, than an actual language that's filtered through us as her children.
Do you think you have an awareness of language that you might not have? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does certainly. And as a writer, I mean, we're drawn right to our heritage, and in America, where the heritage really wasn't to us passed down strongly, there's a kind of an emptiness there that has. I have another essay that speaks to that in Satellite called "The Days of the Dead." So yeah, I mean, certainly it's informed my writing in that respect, but it's almost again kind of a what is the place as much as what is the culture of that place? What is the geography that's kind of drawn me in as a writer?
Thank you. How about you, Michael?
I've been thinking about this a lot today. I grew up in the rural South, and there were no ethnics there. There was no Germans, no Italians. Almost everyone came from English or Irish descent. And, we kind of, we desperately wanted to find a place to be in that community. We definitely tried harder to be part of that community than they ever gave a damn about Germans or Italians. I think we had this kind of split lives in a way, a kind of yearning to be part of the place we were in on the Outer Banks, and um, a kind of weird, almost like embarrassment about who we were, because we were not part of that culture. Um, and the other thing I think about too is that I think the children of immigrants have a different sense of relationship to country and to government. And like my mother and grandparents were kind of real hardcore, love America or leave it, because they had come from other places and kind of out of oppression, right? Um, and they were very almost ashamed they were wary of the government and wary of society, but almost ashamed if you were part of a protest movement. Like when I in college became, part of the anti-war movement and later became, involved in protests against the governments of Reagan and Bush and, the Iraqi war and all that other stuff. Um, it was almost like I had done the biggest hurt to my parents that I could have ever done, because somehow that was like you were ungrateful, for what you were given. And that's a weird kind of dichotomy. You have to reconcile that all the time, I think. So I guess always there's this kind of inside and outside, kind of interiority and exteriority that you're trying to think about and reconcile. And I think it's very different from most of what people have been in the country for a long time. And my grandmother was one of those people. She had been, she was part of the New Amsterdam thing that went back to the 1600s. So she had this kind of like, she's related to Betsy Ross and kind of crazy Americana nonsense lore, right? So there was this kind of strange thing that she did not have that the rest of us did, which was this sort of underlying, I don't want to say anxiety, but it was kind of an edge. And I think it kind of pushed me in many ways towards the arts. And in many ways, kind of it measured up my interest in the arts against the best of what the world had made, right? I mean, you walk on the shoulders of writers and artists who you revere, from all over the world, and I think that I think that sense has been kind of instilled in me as a child of an immigrant, but I don't know. It could be wrong.
Thank you. That's really interesting as well. Ira, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think I very much agree with Michael, what you said about, I think immigrants have a really interesting and different relationship to the idea of country. And I think to me, one of the things that I'm in my work that I'm always kind of working towards is creating a much more diverse and varied idea of what the immigrant story is, right? Because I think I look at it from the lens of Thai immigrants. The Thai immigrant is a different immigrant story. And one of the things that if you talk to any Thai person, one of the things that Thai people are fiercely proud of is that it's one of the only Southeast Asian or Asian country that has never been colonized, right? Yeah. And because of that, there is a fierce loyalty to Thailand. And most Thai immigrants who immigrated in the 60s and 70s, my mom and my father included, viewed America as a stopping point just to work and earn money. But their entire goal was to return home. Home was never America. Home is Thailand, right? My mother, when she retired after 36 years working as a nurse, she went back, right? Most of her friends and classmates who also came during that time period, most of them went back too. Some of them stayed because they couldn't be far from their kids, but most of them came back. So I think to me that's a different way of looking at an immigrant narrative, right? That's a different immigrant story. And part of my to me, part of the reason why I think I write is to complicate or to write, say, a counter narrative, as Claudia Rankine would say. Like the responsibility of a writer sometimes is to write a counter narrative to what, say, what our culture deems the singular immigrant story, right? And so I think to me, a lot of my upbringing, a lot of my sense of home, my sense of identity, my sense of belonging, always revolve around this idea of what is home, what is it, and it's something I ask my students all the time too, and it's a very complicated answer. But I think when we talk about immigration and immigrants and the children of immigrants, this sense of place and home, it becomes more than just borders and countries. It's something a lot more complicated than that.
That's also really interesting. I'm in the middle of Claudia Rankine's book, Just Us, right now. And I found that to all of your points, I think often writers had some dynamic at work or an incident or something that led them to see culture or their lives from across the room, somehow observing displaced somehow, and that just led to this interesting way of thinking about things. I like how Michael said that the arts can be a home for those kinds of grappling with ideas, right? I'd love to stay with you, if I may, to hear about some literary works you've read this year that you'd love to share with us.
Well, one of the things that, and I've read these books actually in the past couple of years, so I'm cheating a little bit. And I think for me, one of the things that I'm really kind of so happy about is about maybe 12 years ago, I did a reading in LA for Thai American writers, and at the time there was only four of us, right? And so now what we're seeing in Southeast Asian American literature is the next generation of Asian American literature. So the writers that I've read in the past 2 years have been young Thai writers like Sunisa Manning, who wrote a wonderful book called A Good True Thai, and it's about the democracy riots and demonstrations in the 1970s in Bangkok. Very influential time period. Wonderful, beautiful book. And also a writer by the name of Jasmine Sauer, who published this really wonderful book called The Anchored World, which is retelling of fairy tale and folklore that is both from retelling certain grim fairy tales, but also Thai folklore too, but injecting this idea of, I think, America or contemporary culture, pop culture into the work too. So those are two writers, Jasmine Sauer and Sunisa Manning, who are two really wonderful young Thai writers that everyone should be checking out.
That's great. Thank you, Michael.
I have been, as you might have gathered from where I grew up, I've been really interested in writing much more echo poetry recently, and was really thrilled to have the opportunity to meet Ada Limon and hear her read and kick off this book, You Are Here, a collection of poets, actually including Ruth Awad's in here as well, and a number of other really great poems in here. So that's been a kind of profound influence on me, and just kind of thinking about why she chose the works that she did, having gone in on some occasions to do a little deeper dive into the artists or the poets that she included. So yeah, that's been great, and it's really kind of tutorial for, I think, thinking about echo poetry, and it's been good for me, I think so.
That's really great. I was also at that Limon reading at the
Oh, yeah.
Cuyahoga National Park. It
Great.
was really phenomenal.
Yeah.
She came to the park to have to dedicate a park
Mhm.
bench that had a poem from the collection, a
Right.
Jean Valentine poem, yes?
I think so, yes.
So yeah, such a thrill.
And she was super nice and really kind of open and really friendly, and that was great. I took a little time to have her sign the book and chat with her, and as those things go, they kind of like looking at your watch and hoping to go home, but she was like really friendly and very generous with their time. So
So lovely. Thank
mhm.
you. Simmons, what are you reading?
So I finished reading not too long ago a really wonderful collection by Andrew Furman, who's a South Florida writer. Well, lives in South Florida now. In fact, it's called Of Slash Pines and Manatees, a highly selective field guide to my suburban wilderness. And one of the
Oh,
reasons I really like that book is because my mom never settled anywhere for more than 4 years. So every 4 years we moved, and the 4 years of my high school time plus eighth grade, maybe 5 years, I guess in that case, were in Central Florida. And really, we moved there after we lived in Tucson for a bit, where I'm back now. And those were really formidable years for me, both in Tucson and in Central Florida. And so much of what Andrew Furman writes about in that really bring back memories. And it's a beautiful book of place and humans place in place and what it means, in a world of sort of rapid environmental and cultural change. So that's a book I really enjoyed and highly recommend. And I don't think it's getting quite the coverage really that it deserves. And then I also just finished reading, and I have it right here, Catherine Larson's Wedding of the Foxes. And Catherine is a poet and an essayist. She won the Yale Younger Poet Series Prize, and this collection, which was just published by Milkweed, is really fascinating. It is half of them are letters to female Japanese authors, even though she's not of Japanese descent, and the other half are her sort of perspectives on raising children in Tucson, where she's lived, and she was also, well, not exactly an ecologist, but a marine biologist, I think, of sorts. Anyway, a really terrific book. I hope to write a review of it before too long for terrain.org. But those two have been really floating around in my brain. I mean, like every writer, you've got a stack of books you want to get to, right? But
yeah.
but those two have been really wonderful collections to turn to right now.
Thank you. Thank you for these great recommendations. Thank you all for this generosity of your time, and thank you for the brilliant work that you're putting into the world. We're so grateful, and all good wishes.
Well, thank you.
Thanks to everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.